Hi Aries, welcome to your November 2018 Astro Update. It's Raina here, and this is a really busy month. There's a lot happening, and I just rewrote all of it, so I know how much there is here. So the big news is that we have the North Node going into Cancer on the 7th. And this is going to be for you in the area of home and family, the 4th house. And this can be a lot of different things. I actually believe that for some of you who have wanted to have children and thus far have not been able to, that this may be a great time. The North Node transiting can indicate some sort of destiny unfolding for you in whatever house that it transits through. And in this case, with the 4th house, we're talking about domestic affairs. So whether it is, maybe it's like even adopting a child or being able to give birth to your first child, or even it's not so much just, giving birth, adoption or anything like that, but the sense that something was meant to be. So there's got to be a little bit of a twist, I would think, somehow, that maybe it was difficult for you. You thought it wasn't going to be able to happen, whether it's conceiving a child. Usually conceiving a child is the 5th house, but in this case, because of the nature of it, somehow something connected to becoming a mother or nurturing, and it might be in a way that you didn't expect, like taking care of one of your siblings' children because they can't care for the child. And so the universe worked it out so that you would raise this child, and maybe it was really your child to begin with. It was just waiting for you to unite with him or her. That's what I'm thinking of, not just the garden variety, having a child or something like that. I feel like it's kind of like a twist of fate, but it was destiny all along. And it could be like even buying a house. Maybe this is the house that you've always wanted. So it's like a dream come true, but it wasn't always something that was a done deal. There might have been a lucky break in there somewhere. But again, looking at it from a higher perspective, perhaps it's not so much luck, but destiny. So that's happening on the 7th. And this is going to be a transit of the North Node in Cancer for 18 months for you. And the 4th house is one of the angular houses. So the 1st, the 4th, the 7th, and the 10th houses. So if you want to give it extra emphasis, because they are considered important houses, then that might be of more import. So the other important transit is Jupiter into Sagittarius, the sign that it rules. And this is happening on the 8th of November, the very next day after the North Node goes into Cancer. So, I kind of draw a connection between these two situations occurring. I don't see very often where longer-term transits happen within a day of each other. And so to me, it's like a sea change in a sense. And Jupiter in Cancer is affecting your 9th house of home and family, Aries. Not home and family, of the higher mind. It's the house that Jupiter rules. So Jupiter transiting this house for the next 13 months can really expand your world when it comes to long distance travel. So if this is something that you've been meaning to do, who knows, maybe this will be some time when you'll be able to make that happen if it's kind of been elusive thus far. I mean, for some people, they can even incorporate it into their work life. And the 9th house is the house of the university. So for people that have always wanted to go to college, that might be opening up for you. It's like expanding your opportunities. And it's also luck and money. And it can make those things happen by providing the money to be able to do these things. It's the God house. So for some Aries people who maybe so far have kind of led a more secular life and have been looking for more meaning in your life, this could open you up to new spiritual influences that enhance your life. Ultimately, that's what religion or spirituality are supposed to do. They're supposed to enhance your life. It's not just about having to live without any fun or doing things like that. Sometimes people have like very skewed ideas. I mean, skewed. I think skewer is like, isn't that like shish kebabs or something? A skewer? Skewed ideas, like kind of distorted ideas about what spirituality is all about. And you might find that you have a lot more openness and curiosity involving a particular spiritual path, set of teachings, whatever you want to call it, and that kind of speaks to you at this time. And just to let you know, it's not a matter of, whatever you grew up believing. This could be something that happens that comes into your life and it totally changes the way you think about things, but in a lucky way, in a good way. So you're really lucky when you are engaging in these 9th house areas. And because Jupiter actually rules that house, it makes it even luckier. So any of those things, if it's studying or teaching, it could be teaching at a university level especially. As I said, traveling and exploring philosophy, religion, and things of that nature. Also, publishing is the 9th house. I have a separate video on Jupiter for, the Jupiter in Sagittarius transit for Aries. That's on my channel. So if you haven't listened to it, you can go check it out. It's funny because how I wrote this on my list here, I kind of skipped over something. So Jupiter goes into Sagittarius on the 8th. The day before that, we have the North Node going into Cancer, but we also have a new moon in Scorpio. That's the key here, because on the very same day that the North Node goes into your 4th house of home and family, we have the new moon in Scorpio in the 8th house, another water house. And this is where the sun is for the first 3 weeks of the month in Scorpio. And the 8th house represents the occult, whether you want to call it, definitely astrology and the tarot, metaphysics in general, the secrets of the universe, but sex, death, other people's money. So a new beginning in this house can also be about personal transformation. This is the house that Pluto rules. Also, your ruler, Mars, is the co-ruler of this house. And in part, this can be about reinventing yourself. So again, with the North Node in the 4th house, you're getting a little bit more domestic for some reason. Even if you don't have any kids and you don't want children, you could be doing something with a property or dealing with real estate. So this is kind of a lot different than Aries typically is involved with. You know, you are a fire sign. You're very interested in kind of taking action with the ideas that you come up with. And there's a lot of entrepreneurial energy with Aries, with all the fire signs. But being a domestic goddess is not necessarily the first thing I think of when I think of Aries, or a god if you're a man. But it's not necessarily what I think of. I think of more of that active kind of, even like athletic type of personality that is more interested in the outer world than the inner sanctum of the home and the family. Not that you don't have families and all that stuff, but just very active in the outward world. So this is kind of, I see you kind of shifting a little bit. On the 15th, Mars goes into Pisces, another water sign. We've got a lot of water happening for the first few weeks of the month. Very emotional. But that means that for the first half of the month, Mars is in Aquarius, which is the 11th house for you, the luckiest house, the house of your wildest dreams. And with Mars in this house, it's also the house of friendships. So there could be some kind of conflict with friends, because Mars can sometimes kind of heat up a little bit of sparring between people that are friendly with one another. In some cases, it can simply be that you are more social than you usually are. And this also includes groups that you belong to. But then if you add in the friendships and you talk about conflict, there could be some kind of disagreement with a friend. And this is the important thing about this is that this is the house where the Mars retrograde occurred. So something occurred where you were redoing something, and it could have had to do with a long-term goal of yours that actually connected with career matters, because Mars did go briefly into Capricorn. And so that area was touched as well. And now it's back in that 11th house, and you've resolved whatever this was. And the important thing to take away from this is that Mars is now moving forward completely. And so it's able to be the most effective it could be. You know, like for instance, if there was some dispute with somebody that you know socially, it may have been dragged out for some reason because of the retrograde. And it could even be like an old conflict that got heated up. Or even like an old desire of yours that came back into your mind that you wanted to try to make happen. And now you're more effective in accomplishing your goals. And then on the 15th, Mars goes into Pisces, and that's your 12th house. And this is a very quiet house. This is about meditation, the spiritual dimension, karma, and things of that nature. So this is not a house that is very easy to understand within yourself and easy to kind of categorize. It's really about retreat. So it's not about activity, it's about passivity. I think of the High Priestess in the tarot, and it's like really passive because it's about getting in touch with your higher self. But Mars is all about action, so Mars doesn't do very well in the 12th house. Probably if you feel like doing exercise during a Mars in the 12th house transit, Hatha Yoga is your best bet because it is a spiritual practice, and the positions, the asanas, connect to opening up and activating various energy centers. So it's in alignment with something spiritual, but it's also a physical practice. So you don't feel like you're a slug and not doing anything. On the 16th, the next day, Venus goes direct in Libra, your 7th house. Now, when Venus retrograded, it was in the 8th house. There could have been something going on with a probate issue about some inheritance and who gets what financially. Venus retrograde can bring some kind of a review about money issues to the forefront. And the 7th house can be some sort of legal arena. So you could have it resolved. In the 7th house, it's resolved. And it is, you could, the result of it could be, money in your future, perhaps. Or, this could even be for somebody who was getting divorced, the same thing, like a shared resources in the 8th house. It can also be an area of maybe a marriage situation that perhaps was, if you were having an emotional affair with somebody else and maybe somebody from your past, even because the Venus retrograde can bring people from the past and it was affecting your marriage. So who knows? But whatever was going on gets resolved around the 16th of the month when Venus goes direct in your opposite sign, Libra. The very same day, Mercury goes retrograde. The story of our lives this year about all these retrogrades. In Sagittarius, that 9th house, which is pretty active here. And that brings something up that has to do with a possible contract. If you're making plans to travel, your passport may get rejected or something may have to be redone and you have to, or maybe you're like researching some place that you plan to go to, but you have to do more homework because something isn't quite right. A lot of times when Mercury is retrograde, it's a great time for research, to be able to gather facts that go over a situation that's going to affect you in the future. So research is always valuable during a Mercury retrograde. And maybe this is even something to do with the university. You applied to a school to get in, maybe for the, at least in the northern hemisphere, the winter semester, talking about starting in January, and they sent you back, no, this isn't, there's something wrong here, and it might have to do with student aid because of that Venus retrograde. Maybe there's some student loans that have to be addressed or some other thing that wasn't filled out right in the paperwork. It can also just be your philosophy, just thinking about like, what is it that I believe? And even like along the lines of an organized religion, because it is going to go back into your 8th house at a late degree of Scorpio, this Mercury retrograde. So the 8th house is more of the occult. The 9th house I would categorize as more of an organized religion in terms of it has its own set of beliefs that are almost like we would call rules in a sense. And kind of like getting that sorted out. Like, maybe this has to do with your conditioning growing up into a spiritual spiritual belief system or religious belief system. And how does that jibe with where you're at right now? On the 22nd, the sun goes into Sagittarius, that 9th house. And that's wonderful. Again, that adds warmth, and your own personality might be affected, your own sense of self. And when the sun goes into Sagittarius, that's always going to make us much more positive, although it's hard to make an Aries person more positive because you naturally are positive. And on the very same day, the full moon goes into Gemini. And I was thinking to myself, well, that's what happens whenever there's a full moon. It means the sun is at the exact same degree, opposite sign. So I was saying, what's the big deal about that? But it's not always occurring when a sign goes into another sign. So I have to believe that that is important as well. And looking at what house is impacted, or what houses. So with the sun going into Sagittarius, that's the 9th house, the full moon is going into the 3rd house of communication. And of course, this is a good time to remind you that this is a general reading. It's hard, I think, for people to understand what this means, because you figure, hey, my sun is in Aries or my rising sign is in Aries, so why are there differences depending on the individual? And that's because the degree of rising or the degree of sun sign determines where and when a certain transit is going to occur. And we are just kind of generalizing it here just to give some sort of, ideas of what is happening as all of us are dealing with these transits. But it's by no means going to be exactly how I say it for all Aries people. If you'd like a private reading, I do provide links from my natal chart interpretations below. And I know there are astrologers who go into the different decans or 10-degree, sections or whatever you want to call it. But for me, that's too complicated because I'm afraid I'd get confused too easily. I know if I wrote it down, I probably would be able to do it, but I would rather just be more free-flowing. So that full moon is falling in the area that, it's funny, it's falling in the area that it rules, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised given that you're the first sign of the zodiac. And so the full moon in the 3rd house can indicate that you are aware of, you're made aware of something related to a sibling. Maybe their well-being, or, if you've been out of touch with them for some reason, you hear something about them. This can also be something to do with teaching or learning. So that could be important for those people who really are looking to possibly teach at a college level. The 3rd house doesn't favor that, but it could be a good training ground. If, for instance, if you want to be a high school teacher or a junior high school teacher, and then eventually do the college scene, that might be possible. But the point is that during this time, there may be something going on that makes you aware of. certifications you have to get, things that you have to do in order to maybe, hoops you have to jump through. But it can be, it's really not just, I was going to say it's not just paperwork, but the third house, because this is the house that Gemini rules. You are the universal chart. So every time that you have a transit that matches up with that, it's like the third house can be about contracts. So there may be some kind of things that you have to do that are just like picayunish, but there may be, training that you have to partake in order to qualify to be able to do certain things. And the third house can really be the training ground for that. And that might be your first step, because as I stated before, with Jupiter going into that sector of university level types of teaching, you may have a degree, but you don't have, maybe you have a bachelor's degree, but you need a master's degree in order to teach college. And you are like, and I think it's only like a year. If you go full time, it's only like a year. Maybe you fit it in during this, or at least start it during the transit of Jupiter in the 9th house. And then you can reach your goal. Now, it might not be exactly when Jupiter is still in that house. Jupiter will be in that 9th house until December of 2019. So you've got quite a nice little chunk of time there. But the third house can also be the house of siblings. And so you may find out something about a sibling. You may be ending some sort of training that you've been doing that gives you a certain certificate to be able to do something. So that's pretty cool. And on the 24th, we have Neptune direct in the 12th house. Again, the house that Neptune rules, the house of the unconscious mind, the subconscious mind, past lives. So Neptune is all about that. And when Neptune was retrograding for the last several months, it might have been kind of rough for Aries, because Neptune can be about illusion and casting a haze over a certain part of one's life. And in the 12th house, it can be about, when it's retrograding, it can be about like bearing or exposing all of the illusions that you hold and what keeps you down. And to me, I can't think of the term, but the 12th house can be self-defeating patterns. Neptune can be about addictions, and this could be a time in the last several months when you've had to face some of these addictions. And addictions are not just of substances, to substances. They can be certain behaviors that are compulsive, that lead you down the wrong path, that steal your energy, steal your money, that make you unhappy, that create more problems than they solve. So that can be kind of harsh if somebody has been kind of living in this la-la land. But now that Neptune is direct in the 12th house, it really does favor the spiritual practices that may be coming into your life. You have Mars in that sector as well, so there is some motivation to explore this. And of course, Jupiter in the 9th house, so that's wonderful. Okay, well, I told you there was a lot happening, Aries. And if you would like me to look at your chart and do a personal reading for you, please check out my links below. And I wish you a wonderful November, which I think is going to be quite a turning point for a lot of us. especially those who are aware, people who really treat life as if it's just happening to them will probably not pay much attention to anything that changes in their life because they're not ready for that level of understanding. But if you're interested in astrology already, chances are that you're ready for, or that you already pay attention to the kind of symbols that come into your reality, or just other things that occur, the synchronicities that make life so magical. Okay, Aries, take care. Bye.